The Blazers got one preseason game in the books. Let's talk about what looked good, what still needs work. All on this episode of Locked On Blazers. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Trailblazers, your daily Portland Trailblazers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What up, world? It's your past first point guard and Trailblazers reporter, Mike Richmond. You're listening to another episode of Locked On Blazers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Available wherever you get podcasts and on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe. We are now a full week into the YouTube experiment, or maybe experience. It's not an experiment. We're going to keep doing this. So make sure you subscribe. Go to YouTube right now, search for Locked On Blazers, subscribe to the show. What I want to do in today's episode is talk about the Blazers' first preseason game, a loss to the Warriors. I'm not super concerned with the results. I'm not super concerned with pretty much anything that really happened after halftime. The starters only played, or Damon CJ rather, only played the first two quarters, and it was limited action from the starters down the stretch. So I'm not too concerned with what happened in the game, but I want to talk about what went right, what went wrong, some early observations, kind of empty the notebook for the first time that we've seen the Blazers play in the Chauncey Billups era. But that's what we'll do to close the show, second and third segments. What I want to do here is talk a little bit about the beginning of the Chauncey Billups era. I was able to go to this game. Hopefully this year I'll be able to go to a whole bunch of games and kind of bring you along with me. That's what I hope this show is. I want to get you a little bit closer to the team you love. And the way that I'm going to do that is I'm going to go and ask the participants of the Portland Trailblazers some questions and kind of glean a little insight. So prior to the game, Chauncey Billups and his pregame media availability, I asked him the question that I had been curious about for 2 weeks. Had he ever coached a sporting event as a head coach ever, period, at any level? And his answer, with a gigantic smile, gave a big smile and said, nope, never. This is maybe not a big surprise, right? He's played in the NBA and he was assistant coach, but Chauncey Billups has 3 daughters. One of them was a high-level soccer player. The other one is a teenager who's just getting into volleyball. He also had like a large AAU program in Colorado with like several levels of AAU basketball. So I figured maybe once in there, like a youth soccer tournament or something, he had pretended to know what he was doing and been Chauncey Billups on the sidelines or coached, a random U16 AAU game here and there. Which isn't totally uncommon for guys who have their own AAU program. But Billups said, no, never. His answer was he legitimately gave a big smile, like he knew. And I asked him if he was going to be nervous. And he said he didn't think he'd be nervous because so much of his of his playing career and all this had sort of had prepared him for this. Also, it's preseason. It's not the same level of nerves, but this was his first time in the big chair at any level. He never even coached. Listen, I've coached some youth soccer games. I don't have a shiny resume, but prior to tonight, more head coaching experience than Chauncey Billups. He was pretty interesting about this. A couple things. One, he said the first call he got this morning was at 7 a.m. His phone rings. He got a call from Ty Lue. Really good friend. Worked on Ty Lue's staff last year with the Los Angeles Clippers. And when the phone rings at 7 a.m., see the Tyronn Lue, the first thing Chauncey Billups thought was, uh-oh, why is Ty up so early? He never gets up this early. But it was Ty Lue wishing him luck. He too knew this was Chauncey's first chance to sit in the big chair, first chance to be a head coach. And he wanted to wish him luck. He said, our game starts 30 minutes after yours, so I'll be watching the first 30 minutes of your game. You go be great. And Billups said that helps calm him down a little bit. And he said he said he didn't think he'd be nervous, but he did admit that preseason would be an important sort of learning experience for the coaching staff. And I think to me that was the takeaway, because Billups sounds like a coach. He has a good way of explaining his basketball thoughts. A really sharp basketball mind and a compelling, just interview subject, right? When you talk to him, you're like, okay, yeah, I'm with the program. Tell me more. So, I think there's a general idea that like he's going to just go ahead and kick ass as a head coach, but there is and he might, like, he very well might go ahead and kick ass as a head coach, but there's more to it than that. And he talks about how this preseason will be sort of about getting it down for the coaching staff as well, how they communicate on the sidelines, how they do things, how not only do they communicate to the players on the court, but how they communicate amongst each other and sort of get their plan in motion and rolling and all those things. He said that they have very clearly defined roles on the bench. I hope to dig in with more on that in the future with him and with the assistant coaches on what the sort of defined roles might be. But he said they have clearly defined roles, but then putting those roles into the process would be kind of the things that they need to do. And like preseason will be reps for the coaching staff. I think that's it maybe sounds obvious when you say it now, but it's not something that I had totally considered. I certainly considered first year head coach, growing pains, all those things, but the sort of importance of in games that don't matter, they're still the same reps for coaches. Like and particularly when you take out the main guys, the coaches, even with the end of the bench in there, they're getting the reps and sort of how a play call goes from the bench to the court, what they want to do in huddles, what their emphasis are, all those things like that. I also asked Steve Kerr, who made the transition from longtime NBA player, briefly an executive with the Phoenix Suns, and then made that switch to the head coach of the Warriors. He's pretty successful. Pretty successful in his first year as a head coach. Pretty good basketball team too, but he took a team that was pretty darn good and turned them into a juggernaut like immediately. And I asked him kind of what that most challenging transition would be, and what for him what the sort of hardest part of year one of coaching was. And he said time. You always think you have more time. And particularly that first year of coaching, you've got your notebook out and you've got 6, 8, 12 things you want to get to. And then you kind of get to the first day of the season and you're looking, oh no, there's 10 more things on the list. I thought that was interesting because he talked about there's just so little coaching, like true coaching time in the NBA. And I read a story today in Mark Stein's Substack about how like 2 days have gone by the wayside in the league, and like fewer and fewer teams are practicing twice a day in preseason when it used to be like a totally normal thing. And I think here are the Blazers again. They're a 1-a-day team now, and they're not coming out and playing hard for 4 hours each day during preseason or during training camp. They didn't last week, so there is a really finite amount of time here for Billups, and I think that is that'll be a challenge for him. He's got veterans like Scott Brooks on the staff has done this before, and that should really help him. And obviously Roy Rogers has been assistant coach in the league for a long time, and they've got they should be okay. But I think preseason for Billups is really important, and I don't not that maybe you, dear listener, were overlooking it, or not even maybe that I was overlooking it, but hearing Chauncey talk about it and say, this is my first time, I'm ready to go. It kind of drove home that point that, the preseason has real value for the Blazers coaching staff, for a first year coaching staff, has real value. Not just like seeing what they get out of their players, right? Like that's going to be valuable the same way it could be for any staff, but seeing how they go about that and then sort of the process, I think is going to be really important for them. They have a weird week. Like they play Monday and then they have a week off and they play again next Monday is the next preseason game. And then they play 3 games in 5 days next week. Like it's super bizarre. So in some ways, I think this is helpful to have that first preseason game right now, and then a whole week to watch film, and they'll get a day off or 2 in there, but like a whole week to watch film, to talk about it, to get back out on the practice court, to add new stuff and all those things. Like I think this is a weird setup, but it's good because it's a weird schedule, but it's going to be good for the Blazers. It's going to be good for a first year coaching staff. It's going to have real value for the Billups group because he's going to figure it out. Like dude played forever in the league. I asked him about how he, when he was a player, approached preseason. He said when he got a little older, they played 8 preseason games back then. They've really cut it back down to 4. And 8 was obviously too many. He said he'd play 6 usually, and he wouldn't play full 6 games, except early in his career when if he got in the game, he'd go hard as hell at the whole time. But you kind of learn to pare it back and figure out how much you give and sort of what you ramp up and how you do it. Like he's all this to say, he's done this before. He knows how it works. But sitting in the big chair, as he did for the very first time when the Blazers lost to the Warriors on Monday evening, it's different. Let's talk about what we saw in Billups's first seat in the big chair. Not so much for Billups, we'll get there, but I want to talk about what we saw from the team, what we saw from Anfernee Simons, who was really good, what we saw from Nassir Little, who was not very good, what we saw on defense, a little bit of digging into the rotations, and some other news and notes mostly notes from the notebook, emptying the notebook a little bit. That's what we'll do in the second and third segments. But first, let's talk a little bit about DirecTV. Does this sound familiar? You've got one device that lets you catch the game live, another that lets you stream your favorite shows. You're watching sports highlights on your phone. You've got your neighbor's best friends log in for the good stuff. Well, I want to tell you about a simple way to get all the entertainment you love without the hassle, and a great way to finally get your TV together. It's called DirecTV Stream, and it brings you your live TV and on-demand favorites together like never before. So you can watch your favorite sports and movies and shows all in one place. That means no more juggling remotes and no need to buy another device ever again. And the best part, no annual contract. So get rid of the clutter and the confusion and get your TV together with DirecTV Stream. You can learn more at directtv.com. That's directtv.com. Compatible device required. Content varies by package. Today's show is also brought to you by Shopify. Listen, Shopify is more than a store. Lets you connect with your customers, drive sales, and manage your day-to-day. Shopify gives entrepreneurs the resources once reserved for big business. So upstarts, startups, and established businesses alike can sell everywhere, synchronize online and in-person sales, and effortlessly stay informed. Doesn't that sound nice? Scaling your business is a journey of endless possibility. Shopify powers over 1.7 million businesses from first sale to full scale. That's the scaling of endless possibility. Listen, you can reach customers online and across social networks with an ever-growing suite of channel integrations and apps, including Facebook and Instagram, TikTok, Pinterest, and more, all over your socials. You'll be able to gain insight as you grow with detailed reporting of conversion rates, profit margins, and beyond. More than a store, Shopify grows with you. This is possibility powered by Shopify. So go to shopify.com/lockedonnba. It's all lowercase for a free 14-day trial to get full access to Shopify's entire suite of features. Grow your business with Shopify today. Go to shopify.com/lockedonnba right now. Shopify.com/lockedonnba. All right. So we talked about Chauncey Billups day one and the coaching staff. I wanted to lead with that because it was the first thing that happened to me in the building. I get there and go through pregame interviews, which are generally not particularly fruitful, but this one turned out to be relatively fruitful. Made me kind of think about what I was about to watch. Was new for everybody, I think, was kind of the theme of this. It's a new system, and it's a new offense, new defense, new coaching staff, new protocols in the building, new. Let me say this before we get deep into the what happened in the game, because I want to talk about what happened in the game. The Blazers lost. They lost big. No box scores today. When the games matter, I promise I'll recap them. Exhibition games where Dame and CJ only played 2 quarters, we're not getting a full recap. I'm going to give you the most important news and notes. But before we get the most important news and notes, I love being back in the building. I loved it. I loved in a way that being back for the playoffs did not bring me the same amount of joy. Being back for this and sitting on press row in my typical seats felt right, and I loved it. So let me just say that I was happy to be back in the building. I talk a lot about joy on this podcast. That brought me a great deal of joy. I'm happy to be back covering this team and telling you about it. So let me do that. Let's get to the part where I tell you about the team. Let's start with the good stuff. Anfernee Simons, good. Really good. They gave him a ton of opportunities to be the initiator, whether you want to call that the point guard or whether you want to call that the offensive initiator or the lead guard or the primary ball handler, whatever word you want to use. He looked good as the initiator. He looked to be in control. The thing that I mostly worry about Anfernee Simons as that lead ball handler, as the primary. The thing that I worry most with Simons is not his passing ability. I think he can make relatively basic reads. I think he's, there was a play where CJ just He set up CJ to go to get a pin down from Nurk. CJ rejected the screen and went back door, wide open. Ant made the pass. I'm not worried about that. Dudes can play basketball. It's the ball handling and it's the getting to his spots and being able to get into stuff, and then it's be able to make high level reads. Today wasn't the day that Anfernee Simons turned into Chris Paul. It wasn't the day that he turned into Steve Nash. He was a Magic Johnson, but he was good as a primary facilitator, and it allows them to do so much. Like, there are going to be games when a pressure defender comes into Ant's space and his ball handling and his strength gets tested away from the rim. Like, that's going to happen this year, and then he'll build from there. He didn't get a ton of that like deep on ball pressure, but he also didn't shy away from just like getting the ball, pointing where guys need to be and getting them set up. A lot of the offense seems to be a lot of read and react stuff. Like, there seems to be options. Like, if I'm here, you can, one of two guys on the wing can set a screen, or you can cut here and there. Like, just a bunch of kind of the way the league works now, where if the ball is in one spot, you have options. And Nurk and Ant did a really nice job of seeing those options, making the right play. He finished with 10 points and 6 assists. The box score is tells you the story, because he had no turnovers and 6 assists and he looked really good. But just like the confidence in getting guys, pointing where guys need to go, and then the value of having Ant on the ball and putting Damian Lillard in the corner. You know what you do when you put Damian Lillard in the corner? You have a defender that is locked into the corner. They are not leaving Damian Ollie Lillard in the corner, which opens up other actions on the opposite side of the ball. If Dame's on the strong side, you know that guy's staying. If Dame's on the weak side, you know that guy's staying. Like, he is parked there and you know it. And the Blazers did a good job taking advantage of that with Norm on the court early. And it was Norm, Ant, and Dame for a little bit there. And I thought that action looked nice. I thought they did a good job leveraging that to get guys inside, both with Cody Zeller and with Larry Nance Jr. and Yusuf Nurkic. Like, Ant, I'm not like trying to get too far out over my skis, but I saw the possibilities there. Like, Ant's just confidence and competence as a passer, making a variety of smart reads, not like crazy high level passes, but a variety of smart reads. It wasn't one pass every single time. There was a little bounce pass, and there was a little pocket pass. There was backdoor feeds. There was nice, just little, Damian Lillard runs across gets 2 screens and comes across the sort of formation, comes across the set, and Ant just hits him on time on target. It's a simple, easy pass, but that's the job, right? Is to make Dame's life easier, and having Ant be able to make Dame's life easier is going to open up this offense. Like, Ant really, he showed, not everything he could be or whatever, but he showed that possibilities. He really opened up the chances of him being a primary ball handler and being pretty good at it. If he can continue to be that way, you saw some of what it can be. I mean, there was some sloppiness and weirdness on offense with him in the game. There's some sloppiness and weirdness with him on offense out of the game. But in general, this was a really, really good and really promising Ant night. And I think there's reasons to feel good about what you saw from old Mr. Simons. On the other side, Nassir Little wasn't good. It wasn't good. Outside of the box score, like, look at the box score and it tells the story, right? Like, he didn't shoot well, missed his first 7 shots. When he finally made one, it was like a late clock fadeaway, difficult shot that you kind of just have to shoot, and he happened to swish it. Nice shot from 17 feet down on the left baseline. But it was the decision making for Nas. I think that was more of the problem for me. Was it wasn't necessarily, like I said, forget the box score. I don't want to read it. But like, it was, the decision making. He drove into the teeth of the defense. He got ripped behind half court, just like clean open rip in the middle of like at the opposite 3-point line by Avery Bradley for a quick layup. There was a couple times where he drove into the paint. Once he got swatted, once he traveled, because he got too deep into the paint with no plan. And it's like, all these other dudes are really good. Like, Nas, I'm not super worried about this, but this is sort of my concern with him, is that he just hasn't had a lot of reps, and he might be trying to he maybe doesn't know what he's good at, like too many dribbles. Like let's put a pin on it. He's not a guy who needs to be shooting after 4 or 5 dribbles. He doesn't need to hezzy and cross and size a guy up and then get into his moves. Like he needs to attack quickly. He needs to shoot quickly and make quicker decisions. And then if he makes those quicker decisions, then he needs to make that secondary decision. And it seemed like he was caught between, okay, I'm going to size this guy up and go, and I'm definitely going to shoot, and he'd get caught, or he makes that quick decision, he gets in too deep, and it's like he just doesn't see that next layer, or everyone knows that he's trying to get to his right hand and do something. He needs to add a little in between game. He needs to add a little more wiggle, and he just needs to be smarter. This was, if nothing else, this was just poor decision making in the sort of the run of play, poor decision making. And I think that was probably the takeaways. Ant and Nas are the Blazers' 2 most recent first round picks, and their biggest swing players. You know what you're going to get from Dame. I didn't even think Dame played well, and then he went nuts and finished with 19 in the first half. He played 16 minutes in the first half and just was like, oh, well, I thought he kind of looked off, and then he hit 5 of 8 threes because the dude is he's just a monster. CJ McCollum, he was really bad early, bad shot early, airballed or bricked a corner 3, missed a layup, had some turnovers, like no, just bad start. And then when he got cooking, like when he got his rhythm, he looked really good, and he was, strong in the paint, getting a shot from mid-range, taking threes. He dropped Avery Bradley on a crossover. I think Avery Bradley maybe stepped on his foot. Like those 2 dudes I'm not worried about. Nurk looked good, not worried about him. Norm, more on him a second. He left the game with a minor injury. Like I'm not worried about him. Robert Covington, great role player, not worried about him. Like the swing players are Nas and Ant. Ant took that step where he looks like he's going to be a really valuable part of this plan. Nas looked like he's a guy who still needs to figure out sort of what and how he's going to do his thing on this particular roster. They're the 2 biggest swing players. The Blazers can be good if those guys don't take a step forward. They cannot be great without those 2 gentlemen coming a long way. And Ant showed the direction he's headed. And Nas, we can just chalk this up to game 1 for now. He didn't look good. We can chalk it up to game 1. A little bit of news before we get to the third segment. Norman Powell left in the third quarter with a right hip, what the Blazers called right hip discomfort. He drove and scored, and then immediately was just like kind of slowly limping back to the bench. The Warriors called a timeout, and he just went straight back to the locker room, didn't return. After the game, Chauncey Billups said that it kind of just it was just the thing that was bothering him. It was bothering him a little before the game, and then it kind of flared up again in that play, and he decided not to push it. Billups did not sound concerned at all. Cody Zeller, in his first game as a Blazer, he was rewarded with a broken nose. Bummer, man. Andre Iguodala went up for a layup around the rim, and he came back down. And as he came back down, just kind of freak accident after the ball went in, freak moment after the ball went in, he just clocked Cody Zeller right in the face with like a forearm elbow action. And Zeller knew right away. He started bleeding, kind of, just bent over and stood there, looked at the bench like, I guess you got to call timeout because my nose is broke. And then he left. Billups, he didn't have it confirmed, but he's like, I'm pretty sure he broke his nose, is what he said when I asked post game. So, a broken nose could maybe keep you out for a little while, but it's a mask thing. So welcome to Cody Zeller wearing a mask. The Blazers will now have 2 guys with him and Rocco wearing a mask. Norm doesn't sound like it's serious. Just sounds like it's a thing that's, bumps and bruises that are bothering him. So 2 minor little pieces of news. What I want to do to talk about in the show, or to close the show here, rather, in the third segment is Chauncey Billups said, don't read too much into the rotations unless you're bored. That was a direct quote from the Blazers coach out of the game. I'm not bored. I love this. I'm still going to read into it. Sorry, Chauncey. That's what we'll do in the third segment. I want to close the show talking a little about Blazers rotations and talking about what I saw from the Blazers defense and what Damian Lillard said about the Blazers defense after game 1 of preseason. But before we do that, let's talk about betonline.ag. Listen, it's the number 1 spot to bet on all pro and college football, which is great because pro and college football season are in full swing. It's Monday Night Football this evening. I'm recording this on a Monday evening, October 4th, but you're not too far away from football being back. Thursday night NFL action, Friday night college football, Saturday college football, all day long Sunday, and then again on Monday, a weekend chock full of football. So if you want to bet on all those games, you'll find updated odds, props on all the games, and some contests, because BetOnline is the number 1 source for everything football. So head on over to betonline.ag, and when you sign up, you'll get a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit when you use the promo code Locked On. That is promo code Locked On for 50% or for a 50% welcome bonus. They'll match your first deposit up to 50%. Not just football, there's basketball and boxing, and there's your favorite casino games. Everything you could want is betonline.ag, where the game starts. Still a pass first point guard. Still Mike Richmond. Still listening to Locked On Blazers. We talked about Chauncey Billups' first night in the big chair. We talked about Ant and Nas and gave you a little injury updates on Norman Powell and Cody Zeller. Now let's empty the notebook a little bit. A couple things. The rotations. This is going to matter. And I think, even though Chauncey Billups doesn't want to tell you or doesn't want me to read too much into it, first of all, he can't stop me. And second of all, I think he tipped his hand or whatever. Like, I think we saw it. I think we kind of know. If you've been listening to this podcast, you know that I kind of have pegged the 9 guys I think are there in the rotation. If you haven't been listening to this podcast, welcome. I'm so happy to have you. What a wonderful time to jump on board. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube. If you're subscribed on YouTube, we're also available wherever you get podcasts. In any case, the starters are what you'd expect: Dame, CJ, Norm, Rocco, and Nurk. The first guy off the bench at the 6:20 mark of the first quarter, Nassir Little, your 6th man. He came in for CJ. That's like a somewhat typical sub of various times, and like CJ being the first sub is pretty typical over the last 5 years. Then the next 3 guys came in all in together at about 9 minutes in the quarter, with like just over 3 minutes left. You got Anfernee Simons, you got Larry Nance Jr., you got Cody Zeller. Those are your top 9. Tony Snell not available, has not participated. He's dealing with a foot issue, has not participated in on-court stuff during training camp, and was not available for tonight's game. But even if he was, those are your top 9 right there. Your normal starters, and then Nas, Ant, Larry, and Cody Zeller. It doesn't take a brain genius to figure that one out. I'm not trying to claim that I know anything, but that is what's going on here. That was like your first sub pattern. I think it's going to look something similar than that. Coming out in the second quarter, it was CJ plus the bench. I think they'll play around a little bit. Then they brought CJ out, and it was Dame plus the bench, and then since CJ played a bunch, he didn't come back, and Ben McLemore got a cameo late in the first half, and he played real first half minutes as the 10th guy off the bench. Ben McLemore is the 10th guy right now. That makes sense, but on a typical night, I don't think he would. I don't think you would have CJ plus bench and Dame plus bench units. Like, I think the first sub pattern was pretty normal. Nas, and then that bench trio of Ant, Cody Zeller, and Larry Nance Jr. That's your 9-man rotation. And then from there, I think you can kind of throw the stuff out. But I think we saw it. Like, I think that's what it's going to look like in the regular season. The groupings might change a little bit, but I think that's about right. The minutes distribution, if you just look at the first half, are kind of wonky because CJ didn't come back in. So it's not a perfect comparison, but I kind of think that's it. Cody Zeller. Chauncey Billups doesn't want me to read too much into it, but I already have. I immediately wrote it down in my notebook as it was happening. So too late, Chauncey. I apologize. The other kind of big thing in this is that the Blazers defense looked like a work in progress. And Billups admitted that, but he wasn't too negative on it. Dame talked about it in his post game, just saying that, like, he likes it, and they've got rules, and the rules say if when the ball's here and we help here, you on the weak side you on the backside have to pull over. And I think the communication was just bad. The Blazers are being more aggressive. So what they're doing is, like, they're bringing a guy up to the level of the screen. So when there's a pick and roll, you set a screen, the big man's coming up. When you bring the big man up, the other guys have to pinch in. They have to just cover more of the lane. And the Blazers were just aggressively rotating. Like, the defensive rotations were more aggressive. They were earlier than we've seen. They were coming to load up to the ball and show bodies to the ball, and then the ball would swing. And when it swung, that was the problem. I thought the first rotations guys kind of seemed like they were in the right spot for the most part. There's a couple of little breakdowns there, but for the most part, it's like, oh, okay, this is it. They're connected, and the ball would swing, and they would totally lose that connection. And it was, this is my concern with this group is not that, is that they're not, it's like that scheme, a different scheme can help and they can get better with a new scheme, but that some of their problems are just the connectedness, some of the communication. It's just like when the ball moves, you got to, one guy rotates out and the ball it goes here, then a third guy rotates out. You got to help the helper, like an X out, which is like if your guy is on the inside, you chase the guy in the 3-point line and then someone has to get down to your man and someone, it's all connected and all those things. I asked Dame if he thought that was more scheme or more communication, and he kind of seemed to say that like communication is important, but a lot of their issues right now are just getting the scheme dialed. Like they know what to do, but this is their first real game, and they just got to dial it in. And I tend to trust Dame when he talks, but like that sounds right to me. That this wasn't an issue of them not talking or whatever. Or like lack of effort, and that's nonsense. This was just like them not exactly being in their, not as tight on where they're supposed to be. They were clearly out of place a couple times. The Warriors took 69 threes in this game. Like they were moving the ball and they were just bombing away from three. The Warriors played fast, which made it hard, but there were just some times in the half court where it was clear, like by the second pass the Warriors made, that the Blazers were in like an unescapable scramble and they were never going to get back and recover. Dame talks about how there's been times in camp where they've looked really good doing it and he thinks they can get there, but they just need enough reps and need enough chances to watch film of them playing a real opponent to kind of get there. And that's, to me, I'm with it. Like I'm with Dame on this one. I won't read too much in the defense. I will say it didn't look good. They gave up some open threes. They gave up some open threes that Steph Curry missed early and Avery Bradley missed early, and then they gave up some threes late when it was a whole different crew that I'm not even too worried about. Other news and notes before we get out of here. Two of the Blazers have 4 players who are competing for the 14th roster spot. Guards Dennis Smith Jr. and Quinn Cook, and big men Marquise Chris and Patrick Patterson, Pat. Tonight, Dennis Smith Jr. and Marquise Chris played, and Patrick Patterson and Quinn Cook did not. I don't read much into that. I've heard sort of the whispers from camp that Dennis Smith Jr. has looked good, but I don't think that means much. And quite frankly, I think Patrick Patterson could play 0 minutes in preseason, make the team, because he's making the team on the strength of the resume and who he is. He's played a decade in the league. He's been dependable. He's played with or for Chauncey Billups in with the Clippers last year. Like the Blazers know they're getting. He doesn't need to play. I would guess, just like based on sort of the whispers I've heard, and who knows if they're, I trust the people who I'm asking, but like these things are fluid. The Dennis Smith Jr. look good, so I would assume that he's a little bit ahead of Quinn Cook, but I don't think that, I wouldn't put too much into that. And Marquise Chris, he didn't look great, but he's one game in and playing with the sort of end of the bench. It is. There's not much to read into it. So I don't think we have clarity there. If I handicapped it early that I would choose Marquise Chris. If I had to pick now, I'd say, that maybe Dennis Smith Jr. has a lead, but like, I can't rule out Patrick Patterson, like a vet who fills their need for another big man. He's there. Like I said, he could play 0 minutes in preseason, and I would still say he deserves consideration. Like I would still throw him in there. One more note: Greg Brown Jr. or Greg Brown III rather threw down a alley-oop dunk, and it was fun. And Greg Brown's not going to play this year, but in the moments that he does play, he's always going to be fun. It's undeniable. The dude has incredible hops. It's a joy. Weird schedule, like I mentioned, like a long time to kind of pour into this one and pour over the film on this one and dissect it and then get bored of it and hit and practice again. Blazers don't play again until next Monday. 6 full days in between games, 7 full days in between games, depending how you want to slice it. It's a long time. So we're not going to have, game recaps, but next week, a whole bunch of preseason games. So the end of this week, we'll have an interview with Casey Holdahl. We'll have another player preview in our countdown to training camp, which we're going to have to speed up to get in here. So be on the lookout for maybe a slight change in format in that one. We'll also do a mailbag episode. I'm going to record that one on Tuesday night and post it on Wednesday. So if you are listening to this and it's before October 5th at like 8 p.m. Pacific time, send me your questions at Mike G. Rich on Twitter or at lockedonblazerspod@gmail.com is the email address. We do a mailbag every week, and it's a ton of fun. So if you're a new listener, we'd love to have you get involved. That's what we got this week. Do me a favor, like I've been saying at the end of all these shows, come back and listen to more shows and subscribe on YouTube. We're up over 300 subscribers in our first week. I'm super excited about that. Let's push to 1,000. Let's triple this thing. Let's get up to 400, 500, 600. Let's get to 1,000. I'm aiming high. If you haven't subscribed and you're listening to this podcast, do me a favor. You're holding your phone in your hand. Go to YouTube and subscribe to Locked On Blazers. It'll help me. It'll help grow the show, and I'll be appreciative of it. Also, tell your friends about this podcast. It's available wherever they already get podcasts. Just search Locked On Blazers, and we'll be there waiting for you. Appreciate you listening. Talk to you soon.